Dawn does not bring light to this place. It only reveals the scope of the vacancy. The field stretches toward a horizon that refuses to curve, a vast expanse of grey earth and tangled stalks. A cold wind drags itself across the grass, pushing the blades in long, rhythmic shivers that sound like dry breath. There is no movement here. No birds circle the sky. No insects stir the soil. The camera drifts forward, carving a path through the silence, passing over patches of hardened mud and dead growth. It keeps moving, hunting for a reason to stop, for a sign that this land was ever touched by human intent. The wind gusts, tearing through the weeds, and for a moment, the grass parts. There it is. A rusted sword, blade pitted and jagged, driven deep into the stubborn earth. It stands upright, defiant against the rot of time. It is the only thing that does not lean with the wind. It marks the center of a hollow world, a single, silent anchor point in a sea of nothingness. The metal is thick with decay, yet it holds its position, anchored by a grip buried deep beneath the surface. It waits for someone to notice, but there is only the wind and the grey, indifferent sky watching back. The camera does not stop at the hilt. It pushes past the iron, sinking into the earth itself, bypassing layers of compressed silt and fragmented roots. Here, the world is dark and heavy. A man lies pressed into the soil, his frame rigid, as if the ground had solidified around his very shape. His skin is a stark, bloodless grey, stretched tight over bone. He does not breathe. He does not decay. He is a remnant of a forgotten era, held in place by the crushing weight of the centuries. His eyes are the only part of him that retains the ghost of motion. They are wide, fixed, and locked onto the grey sky above, as if looking through the very dirt that shields him. He is a witness to nothing, yet he cannot look away. The soil presses against his chest, a constant, unyielding pressure that reminds him of his stillness. He is perfectly preserved in the stillness of his own history, suspended between the life he once possessed and the earth that claimed him. He waits. He watches. He is the heartbeat of the land, silenced but not gone, trapped in a cycle that refuses to let him rest, while the sky above continues its slow, indifferent rotation. Time breaks its tether. Above the buried man, the sky begins to pulse. The grey expanse shifts into a frantic, blurred cycle of light and shadow. Seasons hemorrhage into one another. The ground surface ripples as winter snows collapse into sudden, violent spring thaws. Wheat surges from the dirt, golden and tall, then rots back into the mud as summer storms lash the field with rhythmic, punishing intensity. The man remains a fixed point in this blur, his eyes tracking the frantic rotation of the heavens. He is the anchor for a world that has forgotten him. Then, the rhythm changes. A new sound cuts through the wind, the heavy, rhythmic thud of wood dragging across earth. A farmer appears, his silhouette sharp against the shifting horizon. He grips a wooden plow, the tip biting deep into the soil. The blade passes inches above the man's face, turning the earth, exposing and burying roots. Yet the farmer does not look down. He focuses only on the furrow ahead, his movements driven by the necessity of the harvest. He is the first of many, a figure of singular purpose, oblivious to the history beneath his feet. The man watches as the plow moves on, leaving a fresh scar in the dirt, indifferent to the life trapped in the dark. The wooden plow vanished, replaced by the mechanical grind of mid-century trucks. Their tires compress the earth with a new, jarring force, sending tremors down into the dark. The buried man felt the rhythmic pounding of steel axles, a constant, heavy vibration that rattled his very bones. Then came the era of the tractors. Massive, iron-wheeled beasts roared across the field, churning the topsoil into deep, jagged trenches. The ground groaned under the weight of modern industry. Each pass of the heavy machinery pressed the dirt tighter against his chest, yet no operator ever paused. They sat high above, eyes scanning the horizon for yield. Never glancing at the ground, they tore open. The soil was merely a medium for production, a commodity to be exploited, utterly divorced from the history it held. The man lay beneath the churning blades, listening to the roar of engines that spanned generations. He remained a silent witness, watching the surface change from manual labor to mechanical efficiency. The world grew louder, faster, and more indifferent. Every revolution of a heavy tire pushed the memory of his existence further into the deep, dark silence of the subsoil. He was no longer just forgotten. He was effectively erased by the relentless march of progress. The roar of the tractors died. The silence that followed was heavy, pressing against the field like a physical weight. A sudden, cold rain began to fall, tapping against the earth with a rhythmic, insistent pulse. The man blinked as the droplets streaked the dirt on his face, the moisture soaking into the dry soil of his tomb. He felt the shift before he saw it. The air turned thick, grey, and opaque. From the mist, figures began to coalesce. They emerged without sound, their presence manifesting as a ripple in the damp air. They formed a circle around the spot where he lay, a silent assembly that did not move or speak. Their faces remained obscured by the encroaching fog, yet their intent felt absolute. He watched them with fixed, wide eyes, unable to turn away. The rain intensified, and with it, a new sound cut through the drizzle, the sharp, rhythmic flapping of wings. Above the circle, black crows began to descend. They dropped from the low, heavy clouds, landing in the grass with mechanical precision. They did not feed. They simply stood, heads cocked, their eyes black and polished, staring into the center of the gathering. The man realized then that the silence was not an end, but a prelude to a cycle that had never truly stopped. The stillness shattered. The assembly of figures, once motionless, erupted into a frantic, jagged rhythm. Soldiers emerged from the haze, their movements sharp and predatory. They lunged toward the women standing at the edge of the circle, grabbing them by the arms and dragging them backward into the thick, swirling fog. There was no sound of shouting, only the harsh, wet thud of boots churning the mud and the frantic tearing of fabric. The man watched, his eyes wide and fixed, as the world he witnessed dissolved into a blur of desperate struggle. One woman fought back, her hand clawing at the air, but she was pulled beneath the grey shroud of the mist. As she vanished, a single red ribbon slipped from her grasp. It drifted through the damp air, tumbling end over end, before landing face down in the churned, dark earth. The bright color stood out against the grey mud like an open wound. The soldiers did not stop. They moved with a mechanical, relentless efficiency that defied the passage of time. The violence was not an event, but a constant, recurring pulse. The mud swallowed the ribbon, and the field waited for the next cycle to begin. The field did not rest. As the fog swirled, another wave of figures emerged, their faces etched with the same grim determination. Men stepped forward, their forms flickering between centuries. A father from an age of flintlocks raised a heavy wooden-stocked musket. Beside him, a man in a different era leveled a bolt-action rifle, and behind them, another gripped a cold, modern steel weapon. They moved as one, each arm extended, each shoulder braced, and each finger hovered over a trigger. They were not individuals, they were components of a singular, vast machine. The man watching from the earth saw their movements lock into place, a synchronized dance of destruction that spanned hundreds of years. There was no difference in their intent, only in the tools they held. The preacher moved among them, his hands heavy on the shoulders of boys, guiding them toward the front line with the same practiced indifference. The war did not evolve, it merely updated its gear. The fathers stood rigid, their eyes fixed on the horizon, waiting for the command that had been echoing across this field since the beginning of time. Every rifle remained pointed forward, an unyielding wall of iron held by men who had long since forgotten why they were fighting. The air above the soil began to shimmer, vibrating with a low, dissonant hum. The solid forms of the soldiers started to fray at the edges, turning translucent like heat haze. From the tall, yellowed wheat, the ghosts emerged. They did not walk so much as bleed into reality. A woman stepped forward, her hands locked in a tight, desperate grip around an empty coat that hung limp in the air. Her eyes were fixed on the horizon, searching for a face that would never return. Beside her, a man stood with his rifle lowered, the barrel pointed toward the ground, his posture sagging under an invisible weight. Children darted between the stalks, their laughter soundless and sharp before they dissolved into a flurry of black feathers that swirled into the grey sky. The buried man felt the pressure of the earth against his chest, a crushing weight that held him fast. He could not move a muscle, but his eyes tracked the mother as she passed over his grave. A single tear broke free, carving a clean, dark line through the layer of dirt on his cheek. He watched the ghosts drift away, his gaze reaching out to touch them, tethered to the soil by the very history he had witnessed. He was a silent sentinel, paralyzed by the scale of the sorrow he was forced to endure. The camera moved upward, pulling away from the single point where the man lay tethered to the mud. The ground began to tilt. As the perspective widened, the singular patch of grass fractured into a sprawling, jagged mosaic. The tall wheat thinned, and the true geometry of the field revealed itself. Rusted blades protruded from the earth in every direction, thousands of them, arranged in endless, silent rows. They caught the dim light, glinting like iron flowers blooming in a garden of decay. Each blade was a marker, a cold, metallic testament to a life reduced to ash and bone. The camera climbed higher, and the pattern became undeniable, a grid of loss that stretched toward the horizon. There were no longer ghosts or soldiers, only the sheer, staggering volume of the dead. The man below was not a solitary victim. He was one grain of sand in a desert of casualties. The wind whistled through the gaps in the iron, a low, mournful sound that vibrated against the metal. The field was not a place of growth, but a harvest of steel that had stopped the clock of history. The scale of the carnage finally snapped into focus. A vast, undeniable monument to the centuries of conflict that had been buried beneath the surface. The camera did not stop its ascent. It pulled back further until the field, once a landscape of iron and memory, became nothing more than a dark, insignificant patch against the vast, grey expanse of the earth. From this height, the grid of rusted blades disappeared, swallowed by the sheer distance. The geography of the world reclaimed the site, indifferent to the history buried in its soil. A gust of wind howled across the horizon, sweeping through the tall, colorless grass. It caught the black feathers left behind by the ghosts, lifting them into the air and scattering them toward the empty sky. They tumbled in the current, spiraling into the gray haze until they were lost to sight. Below, the earth remained silent. The cycles of plows, tractors, and conflict had left no permanent mark on the horizon. The scale of the world dwarfed the individual, turning thousands of lives into a single, forgotten shadow. The wind continued its steady, hollow rhythm, erasing the last traces of the motion that once lived in the wheat. There was no closure, only the vast, cold stillness of a landscape that had seen everything and remembered nothing. The horizon stretched out, unbroken and empty, as the final feather vanished into the grey.